Hi there, everybody. It's Steve. How y'all doing today? It is March 12th, 2021. Therefore, I have a fresh story for you. So I'm just circling around this, I think it's like a high school extension campus or something, but it's nice and open and quiet, I think. And that's what I like. So anyway, in my previous episode of This Day in History, I addressed a minister who was scamming women into purchasing magazine subscriptions that were faulty. They weren't real. Magazines weren't coming. This is another story, not the same exact type of story, but this is another story delving into elements of scammery. That can't possibly be a word, but I feel like it still applies to the situation. This is a little bit more widespread. This wasn't the work of just one man dressed as a minister. This was the work of several people. And what's interesting is something like this, at a much higher level, involving a lot more money, will probably be a fairly common occurrence amongst the filthy rich, who are kind of allowed to get away with scamming away any amount of money they want, regardless of whether their actions are legal. This is something a little smaller, considerably smaller, but it kind of fits into that same line of people trying to shuck the system however they can. So in the weeks and months leading up to the date in which this particular story was reported in a paper, there had been this kind of they referred to it as bubbles in the newspaper, bubbles of crime. In this particular case, robberies were happening. Now, you go back to the old days of Portland, there was always robberies going on. But even at this time, they were noticing there's even more than usual going on. And there wasn't really an explanation for why there was a sudden spike in these various businesses getting robbed, much more than in the past. And gradually, one by one, proprietors of businesses that had been robbed started coming out and changing their stories. The police had essentially looked into some of these robbery cases and found that it wasn't all that met the eye, so to speak. And it was reported in the story that I read from this date that at least two proprietors of stores who had contacted authorities and said, "I've been robbed." There was one guy they were both guys that worked in northeast Portland. One guy had a business along Mississippi Avenue, which, considering all the historical buildings that are still there, the store that the guy ran probably is still there, depending on its location. And a guy that had a store on Union Avenue, which is just a little bit east of Mississippi Avenue. These two guys, who had claimed to have been robbed recently, came out and said, "Nah, it caught me. I wasn't really robbed. It was a fake robbery." And this started becoming more and more of a thing, was these robberies that these store owners and business owners were claiming were happening weren't quite lining up. So you wonder to yourself, why were all these people suddenly faking these robberies? Was it, an insurance scam? No. What was going on was these guys had money troubles and were trying to find a way out of it. Apparently they thought if your business got robbed and you lost a bunch of money, you might be able to get out of some prior responsibilities. this guy named Vernon Bunch. He's the guy that owned the business that he said was robbed on Mississippi Avenue. Then later came around and said it wasn't true. He admitted to police that he was in debt and he was trying to buy himself some time before the creditors came after him. The other guy who's claimed his business was robbed on Union Avenue, a guy by the name of Howardson, he said he owed back rent to his landlord and was trying to find a way to buy some time. Hey, my place got robbed, so like there's no way I can pay you. So this was becoming, I don't know, it kind of seems like it, by the verbiage of the article, because it was like, this is suddenly becoming far too common of a practice. There was this, it was like, it kind of just came out of nowhere. And it was this sudden string of people, I don't know, maybe they were in cahoots with each other, or like someone heard a story and was like, that story's BS, but I know why they did it, and I've got money troubles too, so I'm gonna do that same thing. You know, that the idea spreads like wildfire. How are they gonna prove I wasn't robbed? You know, I could say, you know, I was closing up shop and there was no customers and got robbed. I was opening up for the day, nobody was outside yet because it was like 5 a.m. I got robbed. You know, it's really, back then it was real easy to claim your place of business got robbed without having witnesses. It was like, well, it was just the time of the day. So it became like this sudden epidemic of business owners that were in financial troubles who all decided to, because it went way beyond these two guys that were mentioned in the article. These were just some of the most recent ones to come out of the woodwork. But there was just this succession of business owners scattered around the city of Portland who were making false claims that their businesses were getting robbed so that they could, you know, beg a creditor, give me another month to pay you off. And then having not been robbed, you would actually still have that money that you claimed you lost. But you know, you could beg your landlord, like, I got robbed, what do you want? Like, I'll pay it all back, just give me more time. And it seems by the date of this particular article, the police were pretty fed up, and there was an attitude of like, we're cutting down on this hardcore, and we're gonna start scrutinizing random robberies, especially probably robberies where there was no witnesses. We're gonna really start scrutinizing these more closely because it's obvious that these types of crimes were being used to manipulate the system by some of these owners. And I wonder, you know, it's gotta suck if you run a business and you actually do, because again, robberies were fairly common at that time, which is probably why a lot of these business owners went that way and used that avenue of robbery to get out of their fiscal responsibilities. And you know, so many people had to be legitimately getting robbed, and the police were probably just, especially at least for that little time period when this was going on, police were probably so suspicious of just everybody. Like nobody was gonna get a clean break. You needed evidence. You needed to show that the money was gone. You needed to show that there was, you know, some witness in your business. It was probably pretty rough for that little period in time to claim that your business got robbed without the police giving you, you know, the side eye. So I thought that was interesting, because again, the concept of people who own a business who encounter money troubles is nothing new. People who do crooked, illegal things when they're in financial trouble with their business is also nothing new. But I just thought, for the time and the place, because, you know, Portland, Oregon, way back in the day was one of the robbery capitals of the country. Robberies were extremely common. It was a very rough city for a long time. But to see these guys try to use this in that way, and I mean, honestly, if so many different business owners didn't try to do it, probably a lot more than would have gotten away with this, I would think. But it seems like too many people were doing this. The drastic, sudden, random spike in robberies in the city was clearly noticeable by law enforcement. And when things drastically change like that, it's going to get the attention of law enforcement. And so they started looking deeper into the stuff, and they realized a lot of these stories were just plain garbage. So, that being said, from the future to the past, best of luck to you guys that couldn't pull this off. Best of luck. I hope you're still able to somehow pay off your bills and pay your rent and whatever you still had to pay for. Probably a lot of people when they got busted for that, because they probably all got in illegal trouble too. These people probably had a really rough go of it in the immediate future after these events transpired. But that's the risk you take when you play games with the law. And that is today's story, today's March 12th story of some more people that tried to pull a scam. Except in this case, it didn't work out for them. Again, the minister that I talked about yesterday, I don't know if he was ever caught. So maybe he got away with it, but these guys certainly didn't. So all that said, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you're enjoying these, these little telling of stories that probably have, when they appeared in newspapers, they were there for a day and then just gone and nobody ever talked about them again. So they're these little hidden gems that I just think are really interesting. The reason I started this series, the main drive I got, was looking up certain stories in old newspapers and seeing these odd little stories off to the side and thinking, oh, well, that's interesting, that's odd. I'd love to do a little something about that someday, and here I am doing that. So that's gonna keep on doing this series. I think these stories are really interesting and entertaining. All that said, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, help my channel grow. You can hit up my Patreon and the link in the description. If you want to help me out that way, I would truly appreciate it, and I'm posting new stuff there frequently. Also, the link to my Instagram and my Facebook are there as well, that are directly correlated to the content I'm doing here and on my other channel, my primary channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. All that said, thank you again for watching. See you next time.